My mother rolled her eyes the second I walked into that courtroom. Not subtle, the kind that screams, "Here we go," like I'm the problem in her carefully constructed victim story. My father just looked annoyed, checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be. But then Judge Andrew Brennan froze. His eyes moved from the paperwork to my face, and I watched recognition hit him hard. "Wait," he said slowly, setting down his pen. "Miss Sullivan, you're the defendant in this case." My parents had no idea who I really was, and honestly that was the best part. They thought I was still that abandoned baby, easy to intimidate, easy to erase. They had no clue I'd spent the last decade prosecuting people who thought they were above the law. They definitely didn't know Judge Brennan was my grandfather's former clerk. This was going to be interesting. Let me back up 32 years. I'm Emma Sullivan, and my story starts with abandonment. My mother Rachel got pregnant at 18, decided. Motherhood cramped her style. My father Derek was a promising hockey player with big dreams, and a baby didn't fit the aesthetic. So they did what selfish people do. They dropped me at my grandparents' house when I was 3 months old and basically vanished. Judge Robert Hayes and his wife Margaret, my grandparents, they didn't have to take me. They were in their 50s, planning easier years ahead. Instead, they got an infant. They never complained, just showed up every single day and loved me. My earliest memory is standing on a stool in Grandma Maggie's kitchen, making chocolate chip cookies. I poured in way too many chocolate chips. She never got frustrated, just laughed and said, "The best cookies have extra love and extra chocolate." Grandpa would come home, still wearing his judicial robes sometimes, scoop me up with flour in my hair, and ask about my day like I was presenting arguments before the Supreme Court. They never badmouthed my parents to me. Not once. When I asked why Mommy and Daddy didn't live with us, Grandma would say they were busy with important things. I believed that for years because kids believe what they're told when the people telling them are kind. But I wasn't stupid. I noticed things. How other kids' parents showed up to school events, and mine didn't. How friends talked about family game nights while I spent those times with people who went to bed at 8. How birthday cards from Rachel and Derek arrived weeks late with messages so generic they could have been written to anyone. The first time I really understood something was wrong. I was 7. Christmas concert at school. I had a solo. 3 whole lines in Rudolph. Practiced for weeks. Grandma and Grandpa sat front row. After the concert, I saw my friend, with both her parents taking photos, hugging, celebrating. I looked at my grandparents and asked why my mommy and daddy didn't come. Grandma's face did this thing where she tried to smile but her eyes were sad. They wanted to, sweetheart. They just couldn't make it this time. But I'd heard her on the phone the week before, calling Rachel about the concert. The silence on the other end. The excuse about Derek's team holiday party. I learned to stop asking after that. Rachel and Derek made their obligatory appearances twice a year if the stars aligned. Christmas and maybe my birthday. Rachel would show up wearing designer clothes, kiss the air near my cheek, and spend the entire visit on her phone. Derek usually stayed in the car. The few times Grandpa convinced him to come inside, you could cut the tension with a knife. I remember one Christmas when I was 10. Rachel showed up in a fur coat, barely looking at me as she handed over a wrapped box. Inside was a tablet. I already had one from Grandpa. When I tried to tell her, she waved dismissively. "Well, now you have 2. Give one to a friend, whatever." Grandma made eye contact with me across the room. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't say anything. She just came over, put her arm around me, and suggested we check on the cookies. In the kitchen, she hugged me tight. Some people show love with presents. Some people show love by being present. Both are valid, but one matters more. I was 12 when I overheard Grandpa and Derek arguing. Derek had dropped off Rachel after a visit. Grandpa met him at the door. "One day that girl is going to be grown," Grandpa said in that quiet voice that meant he was genuinely angry. "And she's going to remember who showed up for her. You still have time to change what she remembers." Derek actually laughed. "Save the lecture, Your Honor. Rachel and I are doing fine. Emma's provided for. That's what matters." "Provided for?" Grandpa repeated slowly. "Is that what you think parenting is? Writing checks?" "It's more than you did for Rachel," Derek shot back. "Wrong thing to say." Grandpa's face went hard. "I raised my daughter. I was at every game, every recital, every moment. She chose to abandon hers. Don't you dare suggest I'm the failure here." Derek left, never tried to come inside again. As I got older, Visits became even more strained. By my teens, I'd accepted reality. They weren't my parents. They were just people I happened to share DNA with. And I was okay with that because I had everything I needed. Two people who actually loved me. Everything changed when I was 18. Grandma Maggie had a massive stroke while planting tulip bulbs in her garden. The neighbor found her. I got the call from Grandpa while in class. His voice was so small, so broken. "She's gone, Emma. She's gone." I drove home that night, 6 hours straight, crying the entire way. When I arrived, Grandpa was sitting in her garden in the dark, holding the tulip bulbs she never finished planting. I sat down next to him. We didn't say anything, just sat there together, until the sun came up. Rachel came to the funeral. So did Derek. They stayed for the service and left immediately after. Didn't help with arrangements. Didn't help Grandpa sort through Grandma's things. Just showed up long enough to be seen and disappeared again. That's when I stopped making excuses for them. After Grandma passed, it was just Grandpa and me. Those Sunday dinners became sacred. Sometimes he cooked, usually grilled cheese. Sometimes I cooked, experimenting with Grandma's recipes. The real value wasn't the food. It was the conversation. He started talking to me about his work in ways he never had before. Cases that haunted him. Decisions that kept him awake. The weight of knowing your ruling could change someone's entire life. "The law is supposed to be blind," he said one Sunday over Chinese takeout. "But the people interpreting it aren't. We bring our experiences, our prejudices, our humanity, to every decision. The trick is knowing when your humanity makes you more just and when it makes you biased." That's when I decided to follow in his footsteps. I went to law school. Graduated. Top of my class. Grandpa was there, beaming. My parents sent a card. Grandpa used his considerable influence to help me land a prosecutor position right out of law school. I didn't waste the opportunity. I worked harder than anyone in that office. Stayed late, came in early, took cases other prosecutors avoided because they were too complex. By 30, I was handling high-profile cases. Financial fraud, corruption, white-collar crime that made headlines. I developed a reputation fast, thorough, prepared, relentless. My personal life was non-existent. 70-hour weeks were normal. But those Sunday dinners with Grandpa remained sacred. No matter how exhausted I was, I showed up, and he never missed one either. Rachel called once during this period. I was 28. Hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. She wanted help with Derek's legal problem, some business dispute. I asked how she got my number. She said Grandpa gave it to her. Then I told her I was a criminal prosecutor, not a civil attorney. And even if I wasn't, I wouldn't help Derek with anything. She called me ungrateful. I hung up. Grandpa apologized later. She backed me into a corner, started crying about how her daughter won't speak to her. "It's fine," I said. "But please don't give her any more information about my life. She lost the right to know those things a long time ago." When Grandpa retired at 82, I started visiting more often. Not just Sundays. Weeknights too. I'd bring dinner. Make sure he took medications. He protested at first. Said I was treating him like he was helpless. But I knew he appreciated it. One night, he said something I'll never forget. "You know, raising you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Your grandmother and I got to be parents twice. First with Rachel, then with you. And honestly, the second time was better. Maybe because we were older and wiser. Or maybe because you were just an extraordinary kid who made it easy to love you." I felt tears. Building. "You and Grandma saved me." He shook his head. "We didn't save you, Emma. We just loved you. You saved yourself. You decided who you wanted to be despite everything. That was all you." When Grandpa died at 87, peacefully in his sleep, I felt that familiar emptiness return. But this time, I wasn't a lost 18-year-old. I was 32, and I'd become exactly who he raised me to be. The will reading happened 1 week later. I expected maybe some books, his watch, personal items. What I got was everything. The house, investment portfolio, savings, life insurance, $3 million. Everything he'd spent decades building, he left to me with one very specific provision in a sealed letter. "My dearest Emma," it began. "You are reading this because I am gone, but my love for you continues. You are the greatest joy of my life. I leave you everything because you earned it. Not through blood, though you are my blood, but through showing up, through loving me, And, your grandmother when others could not be bothered. Your parents made their choice long ago. This is mine. The attorney handed me another envelope. Documentation. Bank statements showing Grandpa gave Rachel $3,000 monthly, starting when I was a baby, continuing for over 20 years, more than $800,000 total. A paper trail of their neglect and their greed. Your grandfather anticipated they might contest this, the attorney said. He wanted you armed with proof. Smart man, because exactly 30 days later, my attorney called. Rachel and Derek filed a lawsuit claiming undue influence, saying Grandpa was incompetent, that I manipulated an old man. I actually laughed. They had no idea who I really was. And they definitely didn't know who Judge Andrew Brennan was. Which brings us back to that courtroom. That moment of recognition. Judge Brennan had been Grandpa's clerk 23 years ago, before becoming a judge himself. He knew exactly who I was. He knew I was a senior prosecutor. He knew what Grandpa meant to me. And he knew the people suing me were the same people who couldn't be bothered to visit a dying man. Your Honor, Judge Brennan said carefully, I need to disclose that I had a professional relationship with Judge Hayes. If either party objects to me hearing this case, speak now. I watched Rachel's attorney, Richard Palmer, whisper frantically with my parents. Rachel looked nervous. Derek looked annoyed. Finally, Palmer stood. No objection, Your Honor. Big mistake. Then let's proceed, Mr. Palmer. Your opening statement. Palmer painted Rachel as this devoted daughter cruelly separated from her loving father by manipulative grandparents who poisoned the relationship. He described me as calculating, someone who isolated an elderly man, and positioned herself as his sole caregiver to secure an inheritance. Judge Hayes was suffering from profound grief after losing his wife of 60 years. Palmer argued, voice dripping with synthetic sympathy. He was vulnerable, depressed, and the defendant exploited that vulnerability. This will doesn't reflect Judge Hayes's true wishes. It reflects Emma Sullivan's calculated campaign to inherit his wealth. My attorney, James Carter, stood for our opening. He didn't need dramatics. The facts were damning enough. Your Honor, this case is simple. Judge Hayes was brilliant, careful, and intentional. He left his estate to the person who earned it through 32 years of consistent love and presence. The evidence will show the plaintiffs received over $800,000 from him during his lifetime, while barely maintaining contact. Meanwhile, Emma Sullivan showed up every single day. Palmer called Rachel first. She took the oath, sat down, dressed for sympathy. Minimal makeup, hair pulled back, looking like the grieving daughter. Mrs. Sullivan, describe your relationship with your father, Palmer asked gently. Rachel's voice wavered. He was everything to me, my hero. When I had Emma, I was so young, just 18. When he offered to watch her while Derek and I got established, I thought it was temporary. Temporary. Interesting spin. But it became permanent. Palmer continued sympathetically. Yes, Rachel said, dabbing at her eyes. They kept her. Made it seem like Derek and I were bad parents for wanting careers. They turned my daughter against me. James stood for cross-examination. Professional, direct, deadly. Mrs. Sullivan, you were 18 when Emma was born, correct? Yes. And you voluntarily left her with your parents when she was 3 months old. It wasn't like that. I was young. I was trying to support Derek's career. Of course. Let's discuss that. James pulled out bank statements. Your father gave you $3,000 monthly starting when Emma was an infant, continuing for over 20 years. That's over $800,000, Mrs. Sullivan. What was that money used for? Palmer stood. Objection. Relevance. The plaintiffs claim they deserve a share of the estate. I'm establishing what they already received, James argued. Overruled. Answer the question. Rachel shifted uncomfortably. Living expenses. Rent, food, normal things. In the last 10 years of his life, how many times did you see your father? Long silence. According to his calendar, 8 times in 10 years. Less than once a year. And you called this devoted daughter behavior? I was busy. I had my own life. Your own life, James echoed. Did that include calling him on his birthday? Father's Day? Silence. When was the last time you saw your father before he died? Very long silence. It was his 84th birthday, 3 years before his death. You came for 90 minutes, left before cake. Didn't see him again until the funeral. Correct? I think so. Yes, no further questions. Derek took the stand next, somehow managed to look even less invested than usual. Palmer walked him through the same victim narrative, but Derek was less convincing. He kept glancing at the clock like he had somewhere better to be. James's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Sullivan, you said you wanted to be involved in Emma's life. How many of her school events did you attend? Derek blinked. I don't know. Several. Can you name one? Silence. Your hockey career ended when Emma was 8. After that, you lived 2 hours away. How often did you see her? We had visits. How many? I'm asking for a number. I don't remember exactly. Would it surprise you that according to Emma's recollection, you came inside Judge Hayes' house fewer than 5 times in 24 years? That you mostly stayed in the car? Derek's jaw tightened. That house was tense. Judge Hayes didn't like me. Or perhaps, James said, pulling out more documents. He judged you for abandoning your daughter and then asking him for money when your businesses failed. 3 ventures, 3 bankruptcies. Each time you asked Judge Hayes for financial help, correct? He offered. After you asked, James interrupted. When Emma graduated high school, did you attend? I think so. James projected a photograph on the screen. This is from her graduation. There's Judge Hayes, front row. Where are you, Mr. Sullivan? I might have had something. You didn't come. You missed her college graduation, her law school graduation, every significant moment, and now you want half of the estate earned by the man who actually showed up. Objection. Argumentative, Palmer shouted. Sustained. Move on, Judge Brennan said. No further questions. Our turn. James called Judge Hayes' colleagues who testified to his mental sharpness. The attorney who drafted the will confirmed he was methodical and intentional, that he anticipated this might be contested. Then I took the stand. James started gently. Emma, tell the court about your childhood. I took a breath. I was born when my mother was 18. She and my father decided they weren't ready for parenthood. When I was 3 months old, they brought me to my grandparents. What was supposed to be temporary became permanent. They left and rarely returned. I walked the court through my entire childhood. Every missed event, every broken promise. The Christmas concert where no one came. The birthday cards that arrived late. I kept my voice steady, factual. Not asking for sympathy. Just establishing pattern. Did you ever discuss the will with your grandfather? James asked. Never. He never told me his plans. I think he wanted me to love him without ulterior motive, which I did. What would you say to the accusation you manipulated him? I looked directly at my mother. I spent 3 decades showing up. I didn't manipulate him. I loved him. There's a difference. Palmer's cross-examination tried to paint me as calculating, as someone who isolated Grandpa, deliberately. I shut down every attempt with calm, factual responses. Isn't it true you knew exactly what you'd inherit? Palmer sneered. I leaned forward slightly. Mr. Palmer, I spent years loving my grandfather. If inheritance was my motivation, I wasted a lot of time. I could have been building my own wealth instead of having dinner with an old man every Sunday. But I chose him because he was worth more than any amount of money. Something your clients never understood. Palmer's face reddened. No further questions. Judge Brennan studied everything carefully. I've seen enough. We'll recess until tomorrow for closing arguments and ruling. The next morning, closing arguments were brief. Palmer appealed to blood and family obligation. James methodically destroyed every argument with evidence. Then Judge Brennan spoke. I have reviewed all evidence and testimony carefully. This is a difficult case because it involves family relationships, which are complicated and often painful. However, my role is to determine whether Judge Hayes's will should stand as written. He looked directly at my parents. The plaintiffs argue that Judge Hayes was unduly influenced and mentally incompetent. The evidence does not support either claim. What the evidence does show is a pattern of absence by the plaintiffs and presence by the defendant. Judge Hayes didn't need to be manipulated into seeing this pattern. He lived it for 32 years. My chest tightened. The court finds that Judge Hayes's will reflects his true intentions. The will stands as written. The plaintiff's petition is denied. Furthermore, I am awarding attorney's fees to the defendant. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. It was over. As we gathered our materials, Rachel approached. mascara streaking her face. Emma, please. Can we talk? I looked at her. Really looked at her. For a moment, I almost felt something. Not sympathy exactly. More like pity. There's nothing to talk about, Rachel. I'm your mother, she said desperately, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. You're the woman who gave birth to me. My mother was Margaret Hayes. My father was Robert Hayes. They earned those titles by showing up. You're just Rachel, a stranger who took my grandfather's money for 30 years and now wants more. Please, she whispered. I made mistakes, but I'm still your mother. No, I said firmly. You had every chance to be my mother. Every birthday, every Christmas, every Sunday for 32 years. You chose not to show up. You don't get to claim that title now, just because there's money involved. I walked out of the courtroom. Behind me I heard Rachel sobbing, Derek's angry voice telling her to pull herself together. But I didn't look back. Not once. The first thing I did after leaving was visit Grandpa's grave. I sat on the grass next to his headstone, next to Grandma's. The tulips I'd planted months ago were blooming. We won, I said quietly. They tried to take it, tried to rewrite history. But the truth came out. 6 months later, I was offered a judgeship. At 33, I'd be one of the youngest people ever appointed to the bench in our state. Your record is exceptional, the governor said. Your grandfather would be proud. He would have told me I was too young, I replied honestly. Maybe. But we think you're ready. Will you accept? I thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. Yes. On my first day on the bench, I wore Grandpa's judicial robe. The clerks had found it in storage, cleaned and pressed it for me. It was too big, hung off my shoulders. But I didn't care. It felt like he was there with me. My first case was a child custody dispute, parents fighting over a 5-year-old, both claiming the other was unfit. As I listened to testimony, I saw myself in that child. When it came time for my ruling, I spoke directly to both parents. This child didn't ask to be born into your conflict. This child deserves parents who show up, who put her needs before their own egos, who understand that love is demonstrated through action, not claimed through biology. I'm ordering joint custody with mandatory co-parenting counseling, and I'm appointing a child advocate to ensure this child's voice is heard, because children remember who showed up for them. They remember who made them feel safe. They remember everything. Make sure what they remember is love, not war. Word spread about the new judge, who didn't tolerate parental selfishness. I developed a reputation. Fair but firm. I valued truth over convenience. I protected children and vulnerable people. 3 years into my judgeship, I got a call. Derek. Rachel was sick, dying. She was asking for me. I'm sorry she's unwell, I said, but I won't be visiting. Tell her I hope she finds peace. But I won't be part of that process. You really are cold, Derek said. I'm honest. There's a difference. 5 years after taking the bench, word came that Rachel had died. Derek sent a brief email. I read it once and deleted it. I didn't attend the funeral. She was a stranger who happened to give birth to me. Her death didn't change anything. 20 years after Grandpa died, the state renamed the Supreme Court building after him, the Robert Hayes Justice Center. They asked me to speak at the dedication ceremony. I stood at the podium, looking at his portrait now hanging in the main hall. Judge Robert Hayes was many things. I began. A brilliant legal mind, a champion of justice, a mentor to countless attorneys. But to me, he was simply Grandpa, the man who saved me when no one else would. The man who taught me that love is demonstrated through action, not claimed through biology. That evening, sitting in my chambers, I felt profound gratitude. Not bitterness about what I didn't have. Gratitude for what I did. Rachel and Derek could have been part of this story. They chose differently. That was their loss, not mine. I pulled out the letter Grandpa left me with his will. I'd read it hundreds of times but never tired of the words. You earned this through showing up, through loving us, through being you. I'm Emma Sullivan. I was raised by Robert and Margaret Hayes. They weren't my biological parents. They were my real parents. The ones who chose me, the ones who showed up. And 30 years after Grandpa died, they're still with me, still guiding me, still loving me, because that's what real parents do. They never leave. Not really. They just transform into principles you carry, into strength you draw from, into love you pass forward. Family isn't who shares your DNA. Family is who shows up every single day for a lifetime. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to define family on your own terms, share your thoughts in the comments below. And subscribe for more stories about resilience, justice, and the power of showing up.